Welcome to Certified Data Engineer Associate DEA-C01 Practice Exam number 11. You'll get 30 exam-style questions. I will read each question, then give you a 10-second countdown to review the answer choices on screen. Feel free to pause the video if you need longer. After each countdown, I will reveal the correct answer and explanation. Question 1. Fabricam Corp has an on-premises Oracle database containing 8 TB of data that must be migrated to Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL. The migration must minimize downtime, and the application must continue serving production traffic during the migration. After the initial migration completes, ongoing changes must be replicated until the final cutover. Which migration approach meets these requirements with the least operational effort? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. AWS Schema Conversion Tool handles the Oracle to PostgreSQL schema translation, while AWS DMS in full load plus CDC mode performs the initial data migration and then continuously replicates ongoing changes from the Oracle source to Aurora PostgreSQL. This combination minimizes downtime because the application continues running during both the full load and CDC phases, with cutover requiring only a brief switchover once replication catches up. Exporting to CSV files and manually applying transaction logs requires significant manual effort and does not provide continuous change capture. Oracle Golden Gate adds licensing costs, requires managing an intermediate EC01 instance, and involves multiple migration hops. DMS with full load only requires application downtime for the entire migration duration, since there is no change capture mechanism. Question 2. A multinational e-commerce company ingests data from multiple sources into Amazon Aurora. The database currently holds 15 GB and grows by 100 GB daily. The data engineering team must perform near real-time predictive analysis with the least operational effort. Which solution meets this requirement? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Aurora's zero-ETL integration with Amazon Redshift replicates transactional data into Redshift within seconds of it being written to Aurora, enabling near real-time analytics without building or managing any ETL pipelines. It supports machine learning, materialized views, and comprehensive analytical capabilities in Redshift. Exporting to S3 and querying with Athena requires a scheduled export step, making near real-time analysis impractical. Glue for Spark stages data in S3 before loading to Redshift, adding latency and pipeline management overhead. Amazon Aurora is not a valid source for data firehose, making direct streaming to Redshift via that service architecturally unsupported. Question 3. A data engineer at Northwind Corp is designing an ETL pipeline using AWS Glue to process daily CSV files from an SFTP server. The files arrive at varying times throughout the day and contain between 100 MB and 50 GB of data. The engineer wants to minimize cost while ensuring reliable processing. The pipeline should automatically start when files arrive and avoid reprocessing data that has already been processed. Which combination of services and configurations should the engineer use? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Oz Transfer Family provides a managed SFTP server that stores uploaded files directly in S3, eliminating the need to manage SFTP infrastructure. S3 event notifications combined with Event Bridge trigger the glue job automatically when files arrive, providing event-driven processing without polling. Glue job bookmarks with transformation CTX parameters track which S3 objects have been processed, preventing reprocessing on subsequent runs. An EC01-based SFTP server increases operational overhead and hourly polling adds latency. Python shell jobs are limited to small datasets and cannot handle 50 GB files efficiently since they lack distributed Spark processing. Data sync with fixed schedule crawlers adds unnecessary latency compared to event-driven triggers and does not prevent reprocessing by itself. Question 4. A data engineer at Fabricam Telecom needs to set up cross-account access to an Amazon S3 data lake. Account A owns the S3 bucket containing encrypted data, SSCKMS, with the default OS/S3 managed key. Account B needs to read the data for analytics. The data engineer configures a bucket policy on Account A granting Account B access and creates an IAM role in Account B with S3 getObject permissions. However, Account B still receives access denied errors. What is the root cause? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The AWS-managed KMS key, OS/S3, cannot have its key policy modified to grant cross-account access because AWS manages the key policy. When S3 objects are encrypted with SSCKMS using the OS/S3 key, only principals within the same account can decrypt them. To enable cross-account access to KMS encrypted S3 data, the bucket must use a customer-managed KMS key, and the key policy must explicitly grant the cross-account role permissions to KMS decrypt and KMS generate data key. The S3 list bucket permission issue would produce a different error, 403 for list objects, not access denied on getObject. While specifying the exact IAM role ARN is a best practice, granting to the account ID also works. Both the bucket policy and the IAM policy must allow access, which they do. VPC gateway endpoints are for accessing S3 from within a VPC and are not required for cross-account S3 access. Question 5. Adatum Research uses Amazon DynamoDB to store IoT sensor readings with a composite primary key of sensor ID, partition key, and reading timestamp, sort key. A global secondary index, GSI, on location ID is used for geographic queries. The data engineer notices that write operations are being throttled on the base table even though provisioned WCUs appear sufficient. Investigation reveals the GSI is consuming significantly more write capacity than expected. What is the most likely cause of this throttling? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. GSI write throttling is a common cause of base table write throttling in DynamoDB. When a GSI has unevenly distributed partition key values, hot partitions, the GSI cannot keep up with writes, which creates back pressure that throttles writes on the base table. This happens because DynamoDB must propagate every base table write to all GSIs asynchronously. And if the GSI is throttled, the base table write is also throttled. GSIs have their own separate provision throughput and do not share capacity with the base table, but GSI throttling still backpressures the base table. The absence of a sort key on a GSI does not cause writes to replicate to all partitions. Eventually consistent reads do not require additional write capacity. Question 6. A data engineer at Northwind Manufacturing needs to migrate a 5 TB Oracle database from an on-premises data center to Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL. The migration must minimize downtime and ensure that changes made during migration are captured. After the initial migration, the Oracle database will be decommissioned. Which approach should the data engineer use? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. AWS Schema Conversion Tool handles the heterogeneous schema conversion from Oracle to PostgreSQL, while AWS DMS in full load plus CDC mode performs the initial bulk data migration followed by continuous change data capture to replicate ongoing changes during the migration window. This minimizes downtime because the application can continue running on Oracle while DMS catches up with changes, and cutover occurs only when replication lag is minimal. Exporting to CSV files would require significant downtime since the source database changes during the export and import process. AWS DataSync transfers files between storage systems and cannot perform database-to-database migration or schema conversion. Oracle Golden Gate does not natively support Aurora PostgreSQL as a target and requires significant licensing and operational overhead compared to the managed DMS approach. Question 7. Contoso Retail has an Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL database supporting an e-commerce application. During a database failure event, the application experienced 90 seconds of downtime. The team needs to reduce failover time for Lambda-based microservices connecting to the database. Which solution will most effectively reduce failover impact? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Amazon RDS Proxy provides connection pooling and multiplexing that reduces failover time by up to 66% compared to direct database connections. It is particularly beneficial for Lambda functions because Lambda can create many concurrent connections that exhaust database connection limits, and RDS Proxy manages this connection overhead. During failover, RDS Proxy transparently redirects connections to the new primary instance without requiring application changes. Aurora Global Database provides cross-region disaster recovery but does not reduce failover time within a single region. Adding more read replicas improves read scalability but does not reduce writer failover time. Aurora Serverless V2O provides auto-scaling but uses the same failover mechanism as provisioned Aurora and does not eliminate connection interruption during failover. Question 8. A company ingests hundreds of unstructured files into Amazon S3 every day and must catalog this data using an Oz Glue crawler, writing results to an AWS Glue data catalog database. Which setup meets this requirement with the least effort? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. The AWS Glue service role managed policy grants all permissions the Glue crawler needs, including reading from S3 and writing metadata to the data catalog. Scheduling the crawler to run daily ensures the catalog stays current with the daily file ingestion without requiring manual intervention. Amazon S3 read-only access only allows reading from S3 and does not include the Glue permissions needed to write metadata to the data catalog. Amazon S3 full access grants excessive S3 permissions beyond what is needed and still lacks Glue-specific permissions for catalog operations. Configuring the crawler to run on demand requires someone to manually trigger each run, which is operationally burdensome given the daily ingestion volume. Question 9. A medical company stores patient records in S3. New records must allow immediate access for occasional queries. Records older than 5 years must be retrievable for legal review within 24 hours. Records older than 15 years must be deleted. Which two options meet these requirements most cost-effectively? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. S3 Standard Infrequent Access provides immediate millisecond access for records that are queried occasionally at a lower storage cost than S3 Standard. Athena queries S3 data directly using SQL without loading data into a separate service. This satisfies the immediate access requirement for new records at the most cost-effective tier for infrequently accessed data. S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval supports retrieval times from minutes to several hours, comfortably meeting the 24-hour compliance window for archived records. S3 Lifecycle Rules automate both the 5-year archival transition and the 15-year deletion without manual intervention. S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval provides millisecond access and is priced higher than Glacier Flexible Retrieval. Since the requirement only mandates 24-hour retrieval, paying the premium for instant retrieval is not cost-justified. S3 standard charges higher storage costs than standard IA for data that is only accessed occasionally, making it less cost-effective. S3 intelligent tiering adds monitoring and automation charges per object and is more appropriate for data with unknown or unpredictable access patterns rather than the clearly defined lifecycle described. Question 10. A tech startup uses Amazon Athena for SQL-based ETL tasks and wants to transition to Apache Spark for distributed data processing without managing infrastructure. Which Athena feature enables this? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. An Athena workgroup can be configured to use Apache Spark as its execution engine, enabling data engineers to run distributed Spark analytics within the Athena environment without provisioning or managing clusters. Workgroups also allow setting query result locations, encryption, and other configurations that apply to all queries within the group. The Athena Data Catalog stores schema metadata for querying data in S3, but does not enable Spark execution. Athena data source connectors allow federated queries to external databases, but are unrelated to Spark support. Athena query settings manage individual query configurations rather than enabling a different execution engine. Question 11. Contoso Analytics has an AWS Glue data catalog that serves as the central metastore for their data lake. The catalog contains tables with sensitive financial data. The security team requires that all metadata at rest in the data catalog be encrypted, and that connection passwords stored in the catalog use a separate encryption key from the metadata. Which encryption configuration meets these requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The AWS Glue Data Catalog supports SSE-KMS encryption for metadata at rest and provides a separate connection password encryption setting that allows using a different KMS key specifically for encrypting connection passwords stored in the catalog. This dual key approach satisfies the security requirement of encrypting metadata with one key and connection passwords with a separate key, enabling different access controls and audit trails for each encryption scope. SSES3 encryption does not provide separate key management for connection passwords versus general metadata. Client-side encryption, CSE-KMS, in the Glue context applies to job bookmarks, not to the data catalog metadata or connection passwords. The Glue Data Catalog is a managed service with its own encryption settings. It does not store metadata directly in customer S3 buckets, so configuring S3 bucket encryption would not apply to the catalog metadata. Question 12. Northwind Retail is implementing a change data capture (CDC) solution to stream database changes from their Amazon Aurora MySQL production database to Apache Kafka topics for multiple downstream consumers. The data engineering team wants to use a managed connector approach with Amazon MSK Connect and the Debezium MySQL connector. During initial testing, the connector fails to start when configured with auto-scaled capacity mode. What should the data engineer do to resolve this issue? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. The Debezium MySQL connector plugin supports only one task and is incompatible with auto-scaled capacity mode in Amazon MSK Connect. The correct approach is to use provisioned capacity mode with worker count set to 1. Increasing tasks is not possible because Debezium MySQL inherently supports only a single task for maintaining transaction log ordering. There is no multitask mode setting in MSK Connect custom plugins for Debezium. Switching to MSK serverless addresses the cluster type, not the connector capacity mode, which is an MSK Connect configuration independent of the cluster deployment model. Question 13. A data engineer at Tailspin Gaming has a DynamoDB table storing player session data with a TTL attribute set to expire sessions after 24 hours. The engineer notices that some expired items are still appearing in query results up to 2 days after their TTL timestamp. The application logic depends on not returning expired data. What should the data engineer do to ensure expired items are not returned to the application? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. DynamoDB TTL deletions are performed by a background process and can take up to 48 hours after the TTL timestamp expires. Expired items may still appear in reads until they are physically deleted. The correct approach is to add a filter expression to queries that compares the TTL attribute against the current epoch time, filtering out expired items at query time. Note that filter expression is applied after data is read, so it does not reduce RCU consumption, but it prevents expired items from being returned to the application. Reducing the TTL duration does not speed up the background deletion process. DynamoDB streams triggers fire when the item is actually deleted by the background process, not at the exact TTL expiry time. A scheduled Lambda scan would consume significant RCUs and add complexity without guaranteeing real-time filtering. Question 14. A data engineer at Fabricam Inc. has a Redshift serverless workgroup used by both ad hoc analysts and scheduled reporting queries. During peak reporting hours, ad hoc queries experience severe performance degradation. The engineer needs to ensure that both workloads can run concurrently without impacting each other. Which solution addresses this requirement? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Redshift Serverless allows multiple workgroups to connect to the same namespace, which contains the databases, schemas, and tables. By creating separate workgroups for ad hoc and reporting queries, each workgroup gets its own compute resources, RPUs, and they operate independently without resource contention. This is the architectural pattern designed for workload isolation in Redshift Serverless. Concurrency scaling helps with burst read capacity, but does not provide true workload isolation. WLM is a feature for provisioned Redshift clusters, not Redshift Serverless. Simply increasing RPU capacity does not guarantee isolation between competing workloads. Question 15. Contoso Insurance has an AWS Lake Formation data lake with a table containing policyholder information including name, email, policy type, coverage amount, and region. The compliance team requires that the claims department can see all columns, but only rows where region equals US, while the marketing department can see only the name, email, and region columns for all rows. Which lake formation features should the data engineer use to implement these requirements? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Lake formation data filters support both row-level security using filter expressions and column-level security using include or exclude column lists. A data filter with a row filter expression region equals US applied to the claims department role restricts their view to only US policyholders while allowing access to all columns. A separate data filter with column exclusions for policy type and coverage amount applied to the marketing department role restricts their column access while allowing all rows. Creating separate S3 bucket copies introduces data duplication, synchronization complexity, and does not leverage Lake Formation's native security capabilities. LFDAGs are powerful for large-scale access management, but tagging individual column values for row-level filtering is not how LFDAGs work. Glue data catalog views do not enforce security as they can be bypassed. Question 16. Litware Healthcare stores patient records in Amazon DynamoDB with DynamoDB streams enabled. The streams trigger a Lambda function that updates a search index in Amazon OpenSearch service. The Lambda function frequently fails because individual patient records contain large document attachments exceeding 6 MB. The team must process both small and large records reliably. Which approach resolves this issue? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. DynamoDB has a maximum item size of 400 KB, so individual records cannot contain 6 MB attachments directly. The correct architectural pattern is to store large binary objects in Amazon S3 and keep only a reference S3 key /URL in the DynamoDB item. This keeps items well within the 400 KB limit, eliminates the payload size issue in the Lambda function processing DynamoDB streams events, and leverages S3's capability for storing objects up to 5 TB. Increasing Lambda memory does not change the fundamental payload size constraints of DynamoDB items or the invocation payload limits. Using keys only view type and retrieving the full item separately still faces the same issue because the large attachments cannot be stored in DynamoDB in the first place due to the 400 KB item size limit. Kinesis data streams for DynamoDB provides different retention and consumer options, but does not change the fundamental 400 KB item size constraint of DynamoDB itself. Question 17. Fabricam Retail operates a data pipeline where CSV files from point-of-sale systems are uploaded to Amazon S3 every hour. The data engineering team has been asked to enable non-technical business analysts to clean, normalize, and validate the data before it is used in Amazon QuickSight dashboards. The analysts have no coding experience. Which AWS service should the team configure for these analysts? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. AWS Glue Data Brew is a visual, no-code data preparation tool specifically designed for non-technical users. It provides over 250 built-in transformations with a point-and-click interface, data profiling capabilities, and reusable recipes that business analysts can apply without writing any code. AWS Glue ETL requires PySpark or Python coding skills. Amazon EMR with Spark Notebooks requires Spark programming knowledge. Oz Lambda with Pandas requires Python coding expertise. DataBrew is the only option that enables non-technical analysts to independently clean and normalize data. Question 18. Fabricam Gaming uses Amazon OpenSearch service to index and search player activity logs. The cluster stores 90 days of data, but analysts typically query only the last 7 days. Older data is kept for compliance but rarely accessed. Storage costs are growing rapidly. The data engineer needs to reduce costs while maintaining the ability to search all 90 days of data when needed. Which OpenSearch feature should be implemented? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. OpenSearch ISM Index State Management policies automate the lifecycle of indices through hot, ultra-warm, and cold storage tiers. Ultra-warm uses S3-backed storage that is significantly cheaper than hot storage while keeping data searchable. Cold storage further reduces costs by detaching indices from the cluster while allowing them to be reattached to ultra-warm for querying when needed. This tiered approach optimally balances cost and accessibility across the 90-day retention period. Cross-cluster replication creates copies for availability, not for cost optimization of older data. Archiving to S3 snapshots requires manual restore operations that can take significant time, making ad hoc searches impractical. Reducing replicas saves some storage, but does not address the fundamental cost difference between hot and warm/cold storage tiers, which can be 80–90% cheaper. Question 19. Tailspin Media has an Amazon S3 data lake encrypted with a SSCKMS using the default AWS managed key Oz/S3. A partner company in a different AWS account needs to access specific datasets in the bucket. the data engineering team has configured a bucket policy granting the partner account's IAM role access to the S3 objects, and the partner account has granted their IAM role the necessary S3 permissions. However, the partner account receives access denied errors when attempting to read the objects. What should the data engineering team do to resolve this issue? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. The AWS managed key, AWS/S3, cannot have its key policy modified and cannot be shared cross-account. When objects are encrypted with SSCKMS using the AWS managed key, only principals within the same AWS account can decrypt them. The solution is to re-encrypt objects using a customer-managed KMS key and then update the key policy to grant the partner account's IAM role KMS decrypt permissions. S3 transfer acceleration improves upload speeds using CloudFront edge locations and has nothing to do with cross-account access. S3 access points simplify managing access at scale, but do not solve KMS key policy restrictions. S3 object lock is for write-when-read-many compliance and does not affect cross-account access. Question 20. A data engineer at Northwind Telecom is analyzing CloudTrail logs to audit access to sensitive S3 buckets containing customer billing data. The team needs to run SQL queries against 18 months of CloudTrail events stored across multiple regions with the lowest operational overhead. Which approach should the data engineer use? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. CloudTrail Lake provides a fully managed SQL query engine specifically designed for CloudTrail event analysis. It supports event data stores with up to 10 years of retention and can aggregate events across multiple regions and accounts with no infrastructure management. This provides the lowest operational overhead for querying 18 months of CloudTrail data. Using S3 with Glue and Athena works but requires managing log delivery, running crawlers, configuring partitions, and maintaining the pipeline. OpenSearch adds significant operational complexity with cluster management and requires setting up subscription filters. Loading into Redshift requires ETL pipeline management, data loading orchestration, and cluster administration. That is the end of practice exam number 11. Review the questions you missed, then come back for the next batch.